Morning, everybody, and thank you for being here today. We appreciate you attending as we address significant developments in a case that has left a very lasting impact on our community and on the state of Florida. Today's press conference will include remarks from Sheriff Richard Del Toro, State Attorney Tom Bakkedahl regarding the Escobedo family murder and the state of Florida's response to the recent federal commutations. We kindly ask that today's coverage be approached with sensitivity this case deserves, given the profound loss by the Escobedo family. Please hold your questions till the end of both statements, at which time we will open up the floor to Q&A with credentialed media. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce State Attorney Tom Bakkedahl.
Technical difficulties?
Yes.
Okay. I don't speak Spanish, so is that going to be all right?
That's okay.
Okay. Good morning. First of all, I want to thank the sheriff, and I want to thank Lieutenant Blanca for hosting this today, and I appreciate the opportunity to address the media. October 13th of 2006, the peace and tranquility of our community was shattered. Gunshots rang out in the southbound lane of Florida's Turnpike early in the morning, awaking several citizens here in Port St. Lucie. The citizens that were awoken had no idea of the horror and the terror that had just transpired within yards of their back doors. Later that morning, a concerned citizen driving south on the Turnpike saw what he believed at the time to be a family sleeping on the side of the road. Being concerned, he pulled over and approached. What he saw, no civilian, no citizen should ever have to see. I can tell you as a prosecutor for 34 years, and I think I can speak for the sheriff and other men and women in law enforcement, you kind of build up a tolerance, if you will, to deal with situations like this, to deal with tragic situations. You emotionally prepare yourself because you know you've got a job to do. I can tell you as I stand here now, almost 20 years later, I remember like yesterday arriving on scene. And I remember seeing what I could only describe as having occurred as a result of an act of extreme evil. What I observed on the side of the road there is unspeakable and inhumane, and evidence of man's inhumanity to man. The death of children stands distinct and apart from all other types of homicides that we might see in the course of our careers. And to see young Julian, then 4 years old, on the side of a road with a bullet hole in his forehead, murdered execution style, along with his 3-year-old brother, Damien, who had been shot in the heart and drowned in his own blood, I can tell you that I became angry. In fact, I would say I was enraged. So, these events triggered what, for all intents and purposes, is the largest criminal investigation in Treasure Coast history. Immediately, law enforcement from the local community, the Port St. Lucie Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, state agencies, federal agencies, other local agencies south of here began to assist and cooperate with the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office in the investigation of this case. It was a massive investigation. It spread over multiple counties within the state of Florida. It spread outside the state of Florida, and it even went international when it delved into Mexico. I can tell you that hundreds of witnesses were interviewed, as well as hundreds of law enforcement officers. Records by the thousands were compiled. Search warrants were executed. Phone records, all other types of various information gathered, as well as forensic evidence to consist of DNA, fingerprints, and things of that nature. Again, what can only be described as an overwhelming, incredible investigation. So, at the conclusion of that investigation, law enforcement arrested a group of individuals. You know, what we hear talk about in the media now at great lengths is this concept of due process. Due process as it exists under the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution. And when you look at the manner in which this case was handled by both federal and state authorities, what you end up seeing is due process on steroids. There's a saying in capital litigation that goes something to the effect of death is different, which means to say that when the government is going to seek capital punishment, the highest penalty at law, the amount of due process that is applied to that case is above and beyond what would normally be the situation. In this case, the defendants that were arrested were appointed counsel, each and every one of them. The two defendants for whom the federal government sought the death penalty had two lawyers. Those lawyers had access to tens of thousands of records and documents and witness statements and the materials that I referenced earlier. Those lawyers had the ability to appear in a court of law, a federal district court, before a federal magistrate and a federal district court judge to challenge the actions of law enforcement, to challenge the collection of evidence, to challenge the execution of search warrants, as they're entitled to under the law of the land and the United States Constitution. They had the full right of jury trial, which is to say for a period of 3 months, 12 plus citizens suspended their lives to litigate this matter, to stand in between their government and a fellow citizen and mediate a dispute. 3 months they suspended their lives, and they listened to testimony. And the defense attorneys had the opportunity to challenge the evidence in court, to cross-examine witnesses, to present evidence, to make argument. Full due process. And at the conclusion of that trial, those 12 citizens, reflecting upon the facts, the evidence, the law, determined that the defendants in this case were guilty, unanimously, beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. But it wasn't done at that point in time, because there's further due process. Ultimately, the issue of sentencing is a matter that is considered by a jury. A jury determines whether or not there is sufficient evidence to warrant a recommendation to a judge that somebody be sentenced to death. And they had an entire another trial, additional trial, in which the federal government put on evidence and the state was, and the defense was allowed to present additional evidence and information in an effort to seek mercy from a jury. And for the first time, as I understand it, in decades, possibly 40 years, a jury in the state of Florida, a federal jury in the state of Florida, recommended unanimously for the imposition of the death penalty. The judge, then independently weighing that evidence, decided that that was the appropriate sentence and sentenced these two defendants to death. But it wasn't over. Because at that point in time, the defense, utilizing its, having its access to due process, appealed to a federal circuit court of appeals, where a panel of judges reviewed the entirety of the case, from the actions of law enforcement through the behaviors in the trial and the sufficiency of the evidence, and determined that the convictions would stand. Not ending there, the defense appealed to the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court, ultimately denying those appeals. That's the due process they got. Now you ask yourself, what due process did they get? What due process did 4-year-old Julian and 3-year-old Damien and his parents get, and their families and their mothers and their siblings and their fathers? What due process? What process did they get? They got undue process. Because on the eve of Christmas Eve, December 23rd, 2024, on the way out of the front door of the White House, within less than a month of departing the White House, a cabal within the administration, by utilization of an auto pen or by the exertion of some undue influence on a clearly diminished president, signed an executive order, or a clemency order, granting clemency to the men who murdered these children without process and without justice, without inquiry, without involvement, without knowledge. Under the cover of darkness, this was done. And of course, by denying them their due process, they were denied justice. Now here's what perplexes me. Here's an administration that has militantly, over the course of the 4 years in office, pushed for a woman's right to terminate the life of an innocent child. Juxtapose that with this. How perplexing is it that you could take that position and then show mercy to somebody who would murder children? It belies common sense. It's staggering in its scope. It conjures in my mind the words of the prophet Isaiah. Woe to the man who would call good evil and evil good. Well, I think it's a question of pure, naked politics, which is to say there were 40 people on death row at the time this clemency order was issued. 40. Now, what did I tell you? I told you that only 37 of them were granted clemency. Now, if you oppose the death penalty, good. Fine. The way it works in this country is the legislature creates laws, and then Sheriff Del Toro and I enforce those laws through the courts. If you don't like the death penalty, the mechanism you utilize to remove it is to vote it out. The people of the United States of America have said, we want a federal death penalty. And yet, this administration, the former administration, took it upon themselves to override the will of the people. And here's why it's political. Because if you do the math, there are 3 defendants that still sit on federal death row. And if your principles are the death penalty is wrong and immoral and not a proper and just function of your government, then you commute them all. But you didn't commute them all because they couldn't take that political heat, whoever made this decision. And I will also say that it's political in the sense that they knew that in a mere month, a new administration was coming into town, and that administration would have enforced those laws and imposed the death penalty or executed the death penalty on inmates sitting on death row. So why am I saying this? Here's why I'm saying all of this. I'm saying this because we are at a crossroads in this country. There is a crisis in the confidence of the criminal justice system. Politics has no place in this process. This is about merely following the law and the application of the law. At present, the people of the United States of America and the state of Florida believe that the death penalty is a just and proper function. I represent the people of the 19th Judicial Circuit, and they elected me not to impose my personal feelings, my whims, my personal beliefs, but to impose the law. The rule of law will hold fast in this circuit as long as I'm the state attorney, and maybe it won't be much longer. And so be it, that's up to the people. But I will apply the rule of law, and I will seek justice wherever it leads us in this particular case. Let me tell you that having prosecuted many capital cases and many more murders, this act is particularly cruel in that, you know, when you're sitting in the audience and you're holding the hand of a mother who has lost her child or a father who has lost his child, and they're looking to you for something, you can't give them anything. You cannot give them that child back. You cannot give them any measure of peace or comfort. But you try as a prosecutor. It's your life's goal. The men and the women that worked on this case and prosecuted this case dedicated their lives. It's grueling. It's the most difficult thing we do as prosecutors. So, on the 23rd, literally that morning, I reached out to our newly elected sheriff. He wasn't even in office yet. And I said, we've got to do something about this. This can't stand. And he said, and anybody who knows the sheriff knows this to be true, I got you, brother. That's what he said. And from that point forward, I knew that we were going to do whatever it took. This is going to be a massive endeavor. I am the state attorney of the 7th smallest circuit in the state of Florida. I am down significantly in staffing. We are going to have to track down hundreds of witnesses. We're going to have to, I've been reading the trial transcript for a month and a half now. I'm only on page 6,000. Tens and thousands of documents. We're going to have to locate evidence spread far and wide. This is a massive undertaking that we're engaged in. I don't have the resources to do it. I could not do it without your sheriff. And on behalf of all of the citizens of the state, I thank you, Sheriff, for your willingness to step forward without any question in committing your resources. I will personally lead a team of 3 prosecutors in my office as we reopen this case, and that's what we're doing. I make no promises to you. I will go where the law and the evidence takes us, and I've assigned 3 of my most experienced prosecutors. Between the 4 of us, we have over 102 years of prosecutorial experience. We've tried over 570 cases, and we've handled over 23 death penalty cases. We're up to the task, and we're going to do it. So I make one promise, and one promise only to the citizens of this circuit, and that's for them. It's for Damien, and it's for Julian. That we will leave no stone unturned. We will leave no avenue unpursued. We will look at anyone who may be involved in this case in our pursuit of justice on their behalf and on behalf of the victims in this case. This is simply a pursuit of justice. This is not political. This is not personal. This is the right thing to do. And so I encourage across the union any of my colleagues that may be in a jurisdiction in which the state has the death penalty and this act has granted clemency to their defendants, that they consider doing the same in the interest of justice and the preservation of the rule of law. And so I thank you. Again, I thank the sheriff, and I appreciate you letting me be here today.
Good morning, everybody. State Attorney Bakkedahl is correct. When he called me the day that this happened, it literally took me about 3 seconds to agree to participate in this case once again. You know, several cases leave lasting scars on you throughout your career, and this was a different type of a case. I remember working at a different agency at that time in 2006, and just the cold-blooded execution-style murder that occurred, not only to the adults but to the 2 children in this case, just left a lasting scar on me and many others that had to investigate this. You know, our law enforcement officers see things that nobody should have to ever see, and so do our prosecutors. And so when he asked for my cooperation in this case after what had happened, it didn't take long for me to agree. And as a sheriff of this county, I'm pledging my full support, the full weight of this office to assist in this investigation. I've appointed our Deputy Chief, Michael Swanchek, and our Captain of our Criminal Investigations Division, Steve Sessoms, to oversee this case, along with the other, we have over 800 personnel in this agency, and I don't care what it takes to make sure that this case gets done the right way. We have a lot of work to do, but our detectives here are second to none. They do a great job each and every single day. I just know by working together, there's nothing, you know, that we can't overcome. I completely disagree with the president's decision to commute this sentence, but I do respect the rule of law. He has a lot of power as a politician, but I have a lot of power as well, and so does our state attorney, being elected officials. And I never abuse that power, but I never forget that we have it either. And we're going to use the full weight of this agency, the full weight of the state attorney's office to investigate this case and bring justice to this family, especially to those two children that deserve it. So I'll turn it over back to our state attorney, Tom Bakkedahl, and we'll answer any questions you might have regarding this case and this investigation. Thank you.
Just to understand, so this almost goes to a new trial, because if you've got to investigate everything, like, what is the process in order to take back what former President Biden did?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what the process would be. Again, we reopen the investigation. You know, luckily a great deal of it has been done. It's a question of cobbling all of the information together. And then in the event that we determine that there's sufficient evidence to warrant prosecution to proceed, we would seek a grand jury indictment, because obviously once we've made that determination, then we will be seeking death. I can assure you of that. And once that's done, it's a full-blown trial, and it's a 2 phases, just like I talked to you about earlier.
Sir, what was your reaction when you found this out initially a few months ago that the commutation happened? Because this has been almost 20 years now.
Right.
What was your first reaction to that? Because you said it was, you remember it as one of the most horrific days
Right.
that this county's ever seen.
My reaction was gut-wrenching. It was visceral. And it was, as I said earlier, I was angry. I'm still, I mean, it's probably pretty evident in the tone of my voice. I'm still angry about this. You know, it's a great point, because, you know, the whole point of the criminal justice system is finality and repose, which is to say at some point in time this is to come to an end. Now for the families of these 37 people across the country, it starts all over again. It's a rewaking of a nightmare for them that they must relive. That's cruel and unusual under any measure. And so my reaction was all of those emotions: anger, sadness, but comfort in knowing that I knew that my incoming sheriff was going to have my back.
Can you go into the specifics on how the sheriff's office will help with this process? Because you've got the legal side, where you have to read all the paperwork. How is the sheriff's office going to help with their staff?
The sheriff's office is going to help with boots on the ground. You know, they're a total force multiplier. I've got 4 investigators in the entire office. We've got to find witnesses. We've got to interview people again. So it's just, I mean, there may be additional evidence that we gather during the course of this. They will do that. They will do what they do in every case, which is, you know, they're on the ground gathering and collecting evidence.
Can you explain how you're going to be avoiding double jeopardy here, since they were already convicted?
Yeah. I asked the sheriff before we came in, what kind of questions do you think they're going to ask? I guess I'm not very prescient. And he said that would be the question. So in 1922, the United States Supreme Court first articulated in a United States Supreme Court opinion a theory called the dual sovereign theory. That theory was as recently as 2019 reiterated by the United States Supreme Court. And the theory is as follows. We live in a federalist government. Under a federalist government, there is the national government and there are state governments. Each state has rights to create its own criminal justice system, to outlaw certain things. Some things are a crime in Florida that are not a crime elsewhere. And so because of that, each state has the right to seek redress for violations of its laws, or each sovereign, I should say. So the fact that the federal government prosecuted them is not a question of double jeopardy. I have the right, the sheriff and I have the right on behalf of our citizens to seek redress for the violation of the rights of this family. And so it's ingrained in the Constitution. It's completely solid. It is not a matter of a violation of double jeopardy.
And when it went to the federal court, that was because it involved drugs. Is that correct? Is that why it went federal in the first place?
There are a number of one of the things I think you'll notice both the sheriff and I avoided doing is getting into the facts and details, the minutia of the investigation, and the reason it went federal or ended up in federal court. There are a number of different reasons. They have tools at their disposal that we don't have, and we have some that they don't have. So That's how it ended up down there.
And I know it's early, but do you have an idea, I know you mentioned in the press release, state capital charges, do you have an idea of what those could be at this time?
Well, there are two offenses in the state of Florida for which you can receive the death penalty. The first is first-degree murder, which could be murder with premeditation or murder during the commission of a felony. The second is capital sexual battery. Obviously, that doesn't apply in this particular case. So the theory would be a variation of first-degree murder.
The 4 counts against Troy and Sanchez each?
As I indicated earlier, Will, and Melissa tells me you get but one question, so this is it.
Melissa lies.
We're not focusing on just those two. We're focusing on the entire case. It could go anywhere. I don't know. A lot has changed in 20 years. We'll see. But, certainly those two are front and foremost.
So you're saying there's more individuals that could face charges like Varela or?
What I'm saying is we're reopening this investigation. Everything is on the table. I'm not making any promises. I'm just saying that that's what we're doing.
Yeah, because as you know, Troya and Sanchez went on trial with Danny Varela at the same time, and Danny's former girlfriend, who's already served her time and gone out. Danny was convicted of a whole bunch of crimes related to drug peddling, but the judge clearly stated that they thought that Varela had ordered these hits. So you're saying that it's not just Troy and Sanchez. You're looking at potentially charging other people already convicted of federal crimes doing life prison terms related to this same case.
I'm saying that the sheriff and I are looking at everyone that could potentially be involved. I'm not naming names, but obviously the facts are, as you've reported them very well and very thoroughly over the years, pretty clear about what happened and what transpired here.
Another question, please. We all know that you know Pam Bondi because of her ties to Florida for many years. Did she by any chance call your office after Biden commuted the sentences and asked you to take this action, or anyone else in the U.S. Attorney's Office reach out to you to ask you to do this?
Yes, we were contacted approximately a month ago by an assistant United States attorney in Palm Beach who had indicated that the Justice Department has asked them to reach out. We were already actively involved in looking into the case. I do, in fact, have a phone call into the Attorney General. She's a little busy at present, but I am looking for a commitment on behalf of the sheriff and myself that they will bring to bear the full weight of the federal government, that they will cooperate. Sometimes, in my experience as a prosecutor, the federal government can be somewhat difficult to deal with, and there's going to be a lot of information and materials we're going to need from them. I know she will reach out, and I have absolutely no doubt that she will commit 100% to the Justice Department to cooperating with our investigation and prosecution.
So no one from the Department of Justice called you and asked you to take the action of what you're...
Well, other than the Assistant U.S. Attorney, who is a member of the Justice Department.
Right. And just one more question, because you know that we have at least, 5 or maybe 6 death penalty cases that are pending right now in the 19th Circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, they've been in jail waiting for their trial since maybe 2018, 2019.
Yep.
It's a long time. So how is it that you've got the resources to take on a massive investigation like this when the cases that are already in the pipeline are taking years just to go to trial?
Right. Great question. It's a failing of the criminal justice system. It's just taking way too much time. We need to be speeding things up. Things need to move faster. My attorneys are, I believe, as a year comes up, we've got 2 death penalty cases that are scheduled to go to trial this year here in the circuit. I hate the COVID excuse. I hate to even utter the word, but there is a hangover from COVID that we're still contending with. But we're going to make do. It's going to happen. There's 24 hours in a day. My office may be only open 8 hours a day, but that doesn't mean we can't work on nights and weekends, and my people do. So I feel that the dedication is there, and again, with the sheriff's help and assistance, we're going to get to the right place.
And another thing, investigations and cases are just never going to stop. Doesn't matter how many are pending right now, each and every single day, new cases come. And I think what this comes down to is what's the right thing to do. And for us, you know, when we look at these two kids and we look at the evidence in this case, it doesn't take long to get to the right answer. The right thing to do is take on this case, see what we can do to help bring justice to this family that was taken away from them back on the 23rd of December.
Have you guys spoken with the survivors of the Escobedo family on what you're trying to do now? Have gotten their take on this at all?
I have not.
My understanding is that the Attorney General has had conversations with them, so I'm presuming that, I don't want to give any false hope, but certainly we are going to be in active communication with them and let them know where we're at, and as we get closer, you know, they'll be looped in, absolutely.
This might be thinking ahead, but if they were to then again get the death penalty under state law, could the federal government take precedence with their life terms if they were to say, no, we want them to serve their life first, almost just pushing it back until it's not an option?
No, I mean, we would take priority, we would take custody of them, we would send them to the Florida Department of Corrections and put them on death row, because that machine's gonna begin churning, just like, you know, previous proceedings.
Well, but would they be serving their federal term at the same time, though, even if they were locked up in a state, Florida prison?
Well, I would say, well, I would have said prior to December 23rd, it doesn't matter because they got life and life is natural life, but I no longer trust that life means life, which is of some concern. So whether or not the Department of Prisons, the Federal Department of Prisons grants them concurrent time with any state sentence, I really don't know the answer to that question. I haven't given a great deal of thought, but even if they did and we didn't obtain death, they would get life in Florida, and in Florida, life means life.
What's the process for you to actually get possession of their bodies, though, and bring them to trial if they're in federal lockup, doing life prison terms?
It requires a writ to be issued and signed and served on the Bureau of Prisons, and then they would have to transfer their body here. So it's somewhat complicated, but again, that's why I'm quite confident that at the end of the day, the Justice Department will move heaven and earth to cooperate and assist us in this regard.